All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we're going to be talking about prohibition. What was it? And basically, because of prohibition, the outlaw of alcohol, what organization grew. And because of that, it changed, American history forever. Okay. So, let's go ahead and get started. So here's your objectives. Um, we're going to analyze the effect that prohibition had on this country, in the good and the bad, but mainly we're going to look at the bad, because there was more bad than there was good. Excuse me, for because I'm pretty sick going from home. I'm in Stanford right now, so from being really hot to being really cold, I got sick. Go figure. We're examining the length people go to get alcohol because some people were desperate to get alcohol. So we're gonna look at that. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Oops, my bad. So here's your warm-up picture. Now the question I'm asking you is what is this artist trying to say about the cop, the law, which is in that bottom, the guy in the bottom, and organized crime. So look at organized crime. Look what the cop is doing to him. Does he look worried? You know, look at his reaction. You know, Tell me, what do you think this artist is trying to say about organized crime and the law? And it helps to read the little signs around um, the the organized crime. It really does. You read that, that's going to help you a lot in answering this warm up question. Okay, so take a moment, analyze it, respond to it. Okay, because we're moving on in three, two, one. So here's the thing, both federal and local governments really struggled to enforce prohibition. People voted for it. People said they wanted to get rid of alcohol because how bad it was. If you remember from several weeks ago, um, people were like, oh, that drinking is evil, drinking is horrible, and they want to get rid of it. So fine, hey, we got rid of it. But there were people who really, really wanted their alcohol, and then there was people who, some people were like, "Good, get rid of alcohol," and then didn't realize, like, man, I need some, because that's usually how some people at the end of their day would have a drink. And they didn't think, oh well, those people drink, those lower people drink, I socialize, whatever, you know. So they didn't think it really would affect them, but it did. So yeah, people wanted their alcohol. Now, on the federal level, who was in charge? They didn't really think about it because they didn't think people would vote for it, you know. So several government agencies took over. First, it was the IRS, believe it or not, the group that makes sure that you do your taxes and things like that. Um, they were in charge. Then the Justice Department came along and took over. And then finally, at the very end, uh, they made an own agency where they specialized in finding those groups that traffic, alcohol, made it, things like that, and that was a prohibition bureau. Okay, now the rules were stricter in rural areas, towns and things like that. All right, so big cities, stricter rules, but in urban areas, you know, I'm sorry, I flipped it. In towns, in cities, urban areas, the rules were looser. In rural towns, which means like towns where, um, like there's not another town for like 10 miles, you know, those places were stricter because, again, there were less people and, so it was easy to make sure that, hey, everyone in this town was following the rules. But in cities, big towns, it was harder because now there's more buildings and more people and things like that. So it was harder. Okay. Sorry for that brain fart earlier. Okay. Now some people became known as bootleggers. So if you look at that picture up on top there, that's a lady who's a bootlegger. That's where they got the name from. They would smuggle booze in their boots. You know, bottles of whiskey, rye, whatever. Um, they would stuff it in shirts and pockets, things like that. Problem is, unless you had it all the way filled to the top, if there was a little bit of air, it would make that swishing noise. So, yeah. So again, bootlegger was somebody who transported, alcohol at the beginning. But as time went on, the term became more for anyone who was basically breaking the law. So people who were making alcohol, transporting it, or selling it, they were then known as bootleggers. Okay, but again, originally it's people who transported it, who hid it in clothing and their boots and things like that. Okay, now it's one thing to transport, another thing to actually have it and sell it, and that's where illegal places were made to sell liquor. And a lot of times these places there to get to, you had to go through a trap door and down a secret like staircase way because they didn't want to make it too easy, for cops and whoever to see it and then arrest people, So barber shops would have like, because people would go in to get barber shops, right? So they would have like a secret door in the back, false wall. People could then go through, and there's another room in the back, and that was where the bar was or where the alcohol was kept. And then they go in, knock on the door, and then little sliding door, a little peephole thing will open up, and hey, here's my money. I want some of this, you know. Okay, so those places were known as speakeasies, and if you don't know how to say it, it's right there in the parentheses, speakeasies. Okay, now here's the thing too. Some people were like, I'm not gonna go through the whole mess of trying to buy alcohol. I'll just make it myself. And some people did. Okay. Again, they would make it in their homes, in their tubs, any which way they could, you know. Uh, but because alcohol was illegal and because people wanted their drinks, this gave rise to the mafia and their syndicates. Now, this is some of these guys are from the very, very beginning of the mafia. Uh, this guy, the first one, Charles Lucky Luciano. Okay, that's a picture of him right there. He's significant because what he did, instead of having everyone, the five families, fighting each other for territory and things like that, he basically said, let's sit down. And he basically broke it down for them. Look at when we fight each other, no one wins. No one wins. Yeah, you may have won the day, but then this group's gonna want revenge because you killed so many of their men, you burned down their place, and it's bad for business for everyone. Instead, let's work together. Let's share, you know, information, resources, you know, because what you help somebody else, that's seen as good, you see in good faith that hey, you helped out this family. In turn, they will help you. You know, one hand washes the other, you know, and that's how we all succeed, you know. So he's the one who created this national crime syndicate, that guy, Lucky Luciano. And because of him, the mafia really started to gain notoriety and were big, made millions of dollars. The next guy, Bugs Moran. Now, this guy is significant because he was a rival to another really big name, gangster named Al Capone, which we'll get to in a little bit. Another very famous guy, Dutch Schultz. You know, his real name was Arthur Flemingheim. Okay. Now, what made him unique was that during the Uh, the Roaring Twenties, he was a bootlegger. Okay, he made a lot of money from selling alcohol and stuff like that. But later on in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, he makes money from illegal lottery racket, which he basically controlled, and he bumped some elbows with the people in Harlem, the black people in Harlem, and they too had their own gang, people with like Bumpy Johnson and stuff like that, and that caused the rift and basically propelled the black mafia. Okay, next one, one of the smartest guys in this whole group, besides Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky. Meyer Lansky was a Jewish mobster. Okay, it's rare, but there are Jewish mobsters, and he was one of them. He was probably the smartest, like I said, and the guy who was squeaky clean, you know, compared to the other guys. You know what I mean by squeaky clean is, I believe he was only arrested like 2 times in his whole life. So compared to other guys who got arrested quite a bit, he was smart and knew not to be a certain place at a certain time and do certain things because he can get busted. But he was a burglar. He started off as a burglar. He was part of the liquor smuggler, scheme, the bootleggers. And he did other things to make money. But what he really did that really made a name for him was he created this group called Murder Inc. It's basically, in a sense, kind of like a company for the mob, where if they wanted somebody killed, he had a bunch of assassins who would do the job. So if you really want somebody killed, okay, uh, how bad do you want them killed? Do you want them just stabbed, shot, things like that, or do you want them to send a message? I want to send a message. Okay, we got these guys who are really good for that. They're gonna charge you this much. Okay, do it. All right. Okay. And the last guy, Bugsy Siegel. Again, just like the other guys, were bootleggers starting off. He thing is, unlike the other guys, he was actually an assassin. He actually killed people. And what made him famous is that he actually went to, not in the East Coast. All these guys were in the East Coast. He went to the West Coast in Hollywood, and he was seen as like, oh, you're a mafia guy, and he liked the limelight. And he also realized, man, we can make money out here in the West Coast. There's a little area in Nevada where gambling's legal, and it's called Las Vegas. We should open casinos out here. And this later on propels the mafia into, you know, being big time. They end up making so much money from the casinos in Las Vegas. And it's all thanks to Bugsy Siegel. So, one of the most famous guys to come out from this era, his name is Al Capone. This guy was making $60 million a year off of bootleggers and speakeasies. All right. That's a little chunk change. And this is nowadays money, $60 million a year. And thing is, he just had to make sure that everything runs smoothly and he made his money. Um, but because of that, because people saw like, oh, I can get into that. It looks easy. I can make sure I can do that and make money. Other little people and gangs wanted to interfere, wanted to have a piece of that pie. And this brought about a large amount of violence, again, between not only the mafia families, but also gangs. Okay. Uh, Even with Lucky Luciano uh, creating the crime syndicates, there were other little gangs that try to get in that um, the territory of the mafia. They didn't care. To them, they saw that, hey, this is our hometown. This is our neighborhood. We should control this area. So yeah. So Al Capone did one of the most heinous things at that time, which was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. Basically, on Valentine's Day, 1929, Capone had several men dressed up as cops and they arrested members of a rival gang. They told them basically, hey, we got you, line up, you know, we're going to frisk you, check you for guns, things like that. But the thing is, they led them into a building and basically lined them up and killed them, executed them. And this became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And this really was the start of the large amounts of violence that was done during this time. Now, here's the thing, there were people who felt like, oh, yeah, great. These gangster guys are sticking it to the government. You know, they're basically being outlaws. Hell yeah. They were cheering them on and things like that. They're giving the people what they want. So people at first were kind of happy with the mob, but then things started to change once they realized how much this is affecting them personally. Um, there was a lot of violence in the streets. Um, the rise of the price of alcohol, because remember, it's illegal. So if a guy says, "Oh my God, how come you're charging me $50 for a bottle when yesterday it was 20?" The mob can control it. Who are they gonna do? What are they gonna do? Are they gonna, try to go against the mob? And what are they gonna try to do? Go to the cops and tell them? One, the cops were probably on the payroll of the mobsters, or two, the cops would arrest them because, hey, alcohol's illegal. So what could they do? You know, um, also the number of gangs that raised up because of this. Again, groups of guys formed gangs to cut into the profits, try to make money like the mob was doing. And then this rose because of that the number of arrests were huge. And then now because the number of arrests are huge, now they don't have enough room in the jails and prisons. So now they need more jails and prisons. So it just escalated to a big thing, and the country was like going through a tough time. They're like, my God, what more could happen? What more could hurt us? So because of that, the support for prohibition, you know, started going away. And then what really hit them, those people were like, oh, what more could happen? The Great Depression happened. And we're going to be talking about that later on. Basically, our country went broke. And some people were like, well, didn't the government used to tax alcohol? It's like, yeah. So because the government can't tax alcohol anymore, that means that's a all that money the mob made, the government could have had. Basically, not as much, but yeah, because remember, the gangsters rose the price of alcohol, some of that. So yeah, the government would have had some money. Would have been enough to help during the Great Depression? Probably something. Something's better than nothing. And this is where some people were like, yeah, maybe prohibition wasn't a smart thing to do. So in the election of 1932, Franklin D. Roosevelt, which is the guy on the bottom, ran on the platform of basically repealing prohibition. He's saying, if I'm president, we're going to get rid of prohibition. We're going to make sure that the mob, those people don't make money, that the government makes money, and then that's going to help us get out of this depression. And the president you can see on top, that's Herbert Hoover, and FDR easily beat him in 1932. Everyone blamed Hoover for the Great Depression, when in reality, to be honest, it wasn't him. It really wasn't him. It was really the president before him, Calvin Coolidge. He was one of the biggest reasons why we had the Great Depression. Okay. So in February 1933, Congress adopts the 21st Amendment, excuse me, which repeals the 18th Amendment. Okay, so this is the only time where an amendment erases another amendment, basically cancels it. Okay, now by the end of that year, three-quarters of the countries ratified, or sorry, three-quarters of the states ratified the amendment. They basically said, yes, let's get rid of this. Now, there were some states that continued to ban alcohol, and they could do that. That was states' rights, right? But officially, every state went back to, um, you know, saying alcohol is legal by 1966. All right, so here's my question to you. Basically, I'm trying to show you that how the rise of the mafia was because of prohibition. So there's a clear connection. So if you were paying attention, you can see the clear connection on how the mob got big. Now, my question to you is this: do you think if prohibition never happened, that we would have ever had the mafia in this country? Do you think they would ever gone as big as they got if it wasn't for the prohibition? If it wasn't for the selling of illegal alcohol? Do you think they would ever got that much money, became that powerful? What do you think? All right. So take a minute, think about it, write your response. Okay. Once you finish this question, you're done for this lesson. Um, so, all right. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Again, I'm sorry I sound sick. Okay. Um, so with that being said, you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.